Hi guys. So I saw a very cool technique online recently, and I decided that I would give it a try. I had a few issues with it, but I'm going to walk you through what I did with these and give you some tips on what to do going forward. And then I'm actually going to do something a bit different along the same lines, and then we're going to kind of do that like live on here and see whether we get the same effect. So basically, I saw a video by Jennifer Maguire a few days ago where she, might be longer than a few days when this goes up, but she used her stencils to not only emboss but to give like a cool background effect. And she was using distress ink, and I just ran with a very juicy ink pad. So I ran with some Stampin' Up! Ink pads, and I'll go through the colours in a minute. And I used some stencils that I had, and I used a variety of companies because I could then see what happens depending on the brand. In essence, they should be fine, should be exactly the same. You shouldn't have any problems because most stencils will be more or less the same. So I used the medallion. I'll walk you through each colour actually in the order that I did them. So I used this medallion stencil from Stampin' Up! That I got ages ago. And this is, I used watercolour paper. Now I know Jennifer doesn't use watercolour, she uses some Nina cardstock, which is just a thick, you can get a thinner version, but like a thickish, I think she used 100-ish pound version, I think, don't quote me on that. And I decided to go with watercolour paper because I didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, I guess that's what happened with her, she didn't know either. But this is the cool part about experimenting with this sort of thing. So I used some, this is Crawford and Black watercolour paper, and it's super cheap. I get it from the works. You get a big pad of it, and it's actually quite nice as a watercolour paper. So these are just cut down to probably a quarter of the size of the main sheet in the pad, and I have a bunch of these cut out already, so I just grabbed some. So what I did was I actually, for this one, I used Stampin' Up's Pacific Point. I went with some colours that I don't normally grab, and I thought, well, worst case, I've used some ink that I haven't used for a while, which is what I've noticed with my colours. I need to use them more, and also it gets me playing with a colour that I'm not necessarily grabbing firsthand. So I grabbed Pacific Point, and I literally took the piece of cardstock on my non-stick mat and just rubbed the ink, just dragged the ink over the whole thing. That's all you have to do, right? And then what I did was I brought in my Cuttlebug. Now I used my Cuttlebug because it was there. There's no rhyme or reason for it. And I started out with the cutting plate because I thought that from what she was saying, for her, you know, the sandwich for each machine is going to be different. But I was thinking that if you wanted to emboss your dies, you would need to use your cutting plate, but you then essentially emboss them into the tan mat. That's not the case. That was too thick and it just would not even try and go through. So don't use your seat plate if you've got a Cuttlebug. You want the formula for your machine that is going to allow you to emboss. That's what you want. So for the Cuttlebug, because I use that, I have my A plate, I have a B plate, I then have, this is a Spellbinders Tan embossing mat. There are other companies that make them. Honestly, I've had this probably 12 years. It came in a pack of 2, and I think my mum's got the other one. So, and eventually it will need replacing. So I put that somewhat near the edge here with a bit of a gap, but not too much over this label. And then what I did was I took my, imagine this just plain ink over the top, like so. I then placed, oh, try not to destroy it. I then placed my stencil, lined it up where I wanted it on the blue. And then I took something that you may not think to take. I took And this is the brand I use, just Tesco's own baby wipes, but it's a baby wipe, that's what you want. And I then laid the baby wipe over the top of that, put my top B plate on and ran it through the machine. And I ran it backwards and forwards, so I went essentially twice. I think on Jennifer she goes through a few times. What I found with this initial one is that it was very, very juicy. And so the first thing I found was that there was a lot of liquid that came out of the baby wipe. So I guess depending on the brand, depends on how much liquid actually comes out. The other thing I found is that there was no embossing. This is completely, it's probably not going to show up really, which is fine, but there's no embossed or raised areas. And normally on the back you'll be able to see the indents. There's nothing. It's just literally, with that baby wipe, it's literally just taken that top layer, or where the stencil was, it's taken that ink off. And that's all it's done. So that's great. If you want that, perfect. That wasn't what I was trying to achieve. So this still works great, and I'll still use it for something whenever I get there. But I just wanted to show you that even with your something like a Stampin' Up! Ink, is a very juicy ink pad. It's very, very inky. So it worked really well. So that's what I did for the first one. So then let's just take that out of the way. For the second one, I used Heidi Swap. I've just labelled it Butterflies. I don't actually know the name of this. I've had this for years. Came in a kit, again probably 12 years old, and I liked it because it was partial on here, so there's a gap, an open area. So I did the same thing again. I had my A plate, but what I did now, this time, I've got stuff everywhere, sorry, is when you, in the old days, when you got your embossing folders from your Cuttlebug embossing folders, they came with this sort of like packaging. This was part of the packaging, and so I took 2 of them and just put them back to back. No rhyme or reason, but that creates a shim for me. So this is, I've had this again for like 1,000 years. So I added this in between my A plate, my first B plate, then I had my tan embossing mat, then I put my now pink an inked piece of cardstock. All the cardstock's the same, and this one I used Lovely Lipstick. It's a reddy pink colour, looks more red on screen actually, but it's got a deep pink to it. And then again, I'll just show you, I then, with this one I kind of jiggled a bit because this width is just wide enough to fit through the Cuttlebug, being a 6-inch. But I just finagled until I got the butterflies where I wanted them, and then shifted the whole lot over so that this would fit in the machine without any problems. So I lined it up. Lined it up, getting ahead of myself, and then put my baby wipe over the top and ran it through. B plate on the top of that, and then ran it through. So again, very easy to do. It was very mushy. There was a lot of liquid again, and I still wasn't happy. I was just like, this isn't working quite how I planned. So I then came with another potential. So with this one, it sort of worked. It's got the darker area where the ink is. It lightened the actual butterflies. This bit also lightened slightly, which is kind of cool. It's got that distressed look, and actually this embossed. Now I don't know if the camera's even going to pick this up, whether you'll see, oh, you might see it slightly there. The butterflies are indented there, but you may be able to see, if I can close enough, that they are actually raised very slightly above the paper. Don't know if, oh, there you can see the actual, like, debossing, if you like, on the back. So it did work, right? But there was a lot of, and this is a very pigmented ink, there's a lot of ink and moisture and red everywhere, which is why this is now pink. So I kept the same plates. So again, my A plate, my shim, my B plate, my mat, my tan mat. I then used another piece of cardstock with pumpkin pie. Did exactly the same thing, smushed it, just completely covered it with ink. Put that down, and then what I did was I took the baby wipe and I went to the bathroom and I squeezed it as much as I could to get some of that liquid out. Seriously, there was so much liquid coming out of it, it was ridiculous. So this was an almost dry baby wipe, but wet enough that it would still hopefully react right. I didn't know what it was going to do. Put these, where's the stencil? Helps if I show you. So I used Newton's Nook pumpkin patch. I love this stencil. I used this in my Halloween series last year, if anybody wants to go and look. And so again, I just lined up the stencil. This one didn't matter as long as it was on there and it was, you know, wide enough for my plates. So I just popped it on there. Then put my almost dry, what's it called, baby wipe over the top. And then put my plate and ran it through. And I gotta say that was the best out of the 3 that I did. That was the best one because there's not as much moisture, but there was enough in the baby wipe, but there was enough moisture to still do what I needed it to do. I've just realised I haven't got any of my lights on. So there's a lot of shadow, I just picked that up. Anyway, random. And this honestly turned out the best. The ink got taken off in areas. You know, it's almost got that distressed look, even though it's not distressed ink at all. The pumpkins are raised, probably not more than the butterflies, probably about the same amount of embossed areas. It's the same formula here. It was just the actual what you call it, the moisture in the baby wipe that was different. But you can see the embossed or debossed areas much better on the back of this one, I think. That's easier there, isn't it? But it turned out the best out of all of them. It just worked so well. So that was using stencils. So now what I'm going to do is I'm essentially going to do the same thing. I won't need a tan mat for this, and you won't need your shim for this because we're going to use an actual embossing folder, and I pray it works. So I'm just going to get a bit more prepped and I'll be back in a minute. Right, so I've put my lights on now as well, so I don't know how much difference this is going to make, but you might get a bit of reflection, sorry. So I've got my 3 pieces of cardstock. This is the same watercolor cardstock as the ones I used with the stencils. I'm probably going to do one on camera and then do the other 2 separately just to save a bit of time because it's already been a lengthy video, but I want to show you one all the way through. Now this is going to be an experiment in itself because I'm using an embossing folder rather than the stencil, which is what Jennifer was showing, but I'm going to show you, we're going to do it together essentially. Kind of like a live show, but it's not live, thankfully. So this is the Crawford in Black watercolor paper. I'm just going to use watercolor paper, and I don't know if I'm going to use I might still use the textured side. There is a slightly textured side. I'm going to still use my A plate, a B plate. I'm going to just use a Cuttlebug again, and then I'm going to just put the inked cardstock into an embossing folder on there, and then B plate on top, run it through the machine, but I'll go through all that in a second. So I tried to get colours that were similar. Excuse me. That was similar to the colours I used, the Stampin' Up! Ink colours, just so you can see it for a reference point, and I'll show you all 6 of them afterwards as well. So for the Distress ink, I've gone with Salty Ocean, and I'm going to use the Cuttlebug Snowflakes folder. I thought the blue and the snowflakes, you know, wintry, when I get there. Picked Raspberry for the pinky colour, and I'm using Stylized Flowers, Cuttlebug embossing folder, excuse me. And then Spice Marmalade for the orangey one, and Lucky Stars. This is an old Stampin' Up embossing folder. I couldn't think of the word. So, what shall we do? Shall we do the Lucky Stars? I'm gonna do it in the same order I did the other one. So I'm gonna start with the blue one. I don't know why, but I'm just gonna start with the blue one. Start in the same order. It's kind of a weird thing. Right. So these pieces, like I say, are just cut to I cut a quarter of a whole panel, so probably about A6-ish size. And so they probably won't fit completely in there, but I'll be able to get the whole pattern on there, the whole embossed look. So this is how difficult this bit gets. Right, you're going to take your, what's it called, ink pad, hello, and you're just going to swipe, or smush. And yes, it will be messy. Be prepared. And you just want to cover the whole thing. Just like that. Oh, pull back. That's your ink done. Now I'm taking a baby wipe. Baby, listen to me, honestly. And I'm going to just clean this up, sorry. Now this is still going to be quite wet. This is a distress ink, it's going to be wet. That's how it works. It's very, very wet. I'm going to, again, I'm not going to dry it because that's not what I did with the Stampin' Up ink and the stencils. So I'm going to wing it as it is. Now the very first one I did, I used just a baby wipe. I didn't squeeze anything out of it. I just took one out and literally placed it on there and went with it. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm trying to do this as close to what I did before. Yeah. So I'm going to place my cardstock in the embossing folder. Then I'm going to place this somewhat carefully on here. Close the embossing folder. Don't worry about all the bits that are hanging off there, you know, it's just baby one. Then I'm going to, in fact I'm going to just curl that under, because I know what's going to happen. It's going to get kind of, oh no, you don't want to do that. Just thinking it might wreck the, come on Janine, what am I trying to say? If it's too thick, it'll, if there's extra padding underneath this, it might not work as well. Oh, this thing's heavy. Alright, so, Cuttlebug going in. And it's still quite tough actually, and you wouldn't think it would be. But it is. So, let's see what happened. So I'm going to take this off. So this cover should be fine. Oh. We're going to then, this is the reveal. Everybody loves a reveal, right? So let's see if this did anything. Yeah. Kind of. Not really. So that didn't work quite how I planned it, but actually, I mean, it kind of did. So maybe we do need to dry the distress ink a bit more. And I guess the reason it's the whole thing is because it's trying to put that moisture across the whole piece rather than through the stencil. So that just shows you how different how it would work differently. So let's just clean this up. So what I'm going to do, I will experiment with the other two and I'll be back. Worst case, you've got some cool backgrounds to use for your, you know, that you can jazz up. But I think that's probably what it is that it's obviously going to take that, trying to take the whole thing rather than just whatever's through the stencil. So I will do the other two. I'm also going to, exactly the same way as I did the stencils, taking moisture out and stuff like that. And I will, so what I'll do is the second one, the pink one, I will dry the ink first, and then the orange one I will take out more moisture from the actual wet wipe, and I'll be back. Right, I thought we'd just go for it. I thought I was going to have camera issues, and I may still, so apologies. So what I did was I inked up both of these panels. This is the picked raspberry, this is the spiced marmalade distress inks, and I've actually blow dried. I've actually dried these off, so you know they're not wet like this one was. This is still wet. And so what I'm going to do is on the pink one, we're going to do this together. On the pink one, I'm going to take my stylized flowers embossing folder, and on this one I'm just going to use a fully wet. I've dried that, but this is still, I haven't taken any moisture out of this one. So I'm going to put that on here like so. Fold that, put that to one side just for a second, and then on this one, again this is dry, I'm going to use Lucky Stars, pop that in there, and this one I've squeezed the, you know, a load of the moisture out of it. So I think with the embossing folders it does work quite a lot differently to the noisy to the stencils. You get a different look, but hopefully you'll still be able to, you know, you'll still be able to use them and that. So I'm going to grab, so A plate, B plate, your folder with your cardstock, and then I'll just get in here. We're going to roll it, and can you see how the moisture's coming out? Ew. And actually, no, I'm going to go roll back as well. Right, so that's that one. So we will just take that one out. A plate, B plate. Back in with the second one. So this is the one that doesn't have as much, just get any excess moisture off there. This doesn't have as much, what's it called? Baby wipe is has less moisture in it. So do you see there's not as much that came out here. Still looks like quite a lot, but compared it's not really. So this is the second one. Let's just chuck that out of the way. So let's see what the flowers did. So again, it's not really done very much. It has a little bit there, but it's still a cool texture. It's still got good background and stuff like that. Just try not to put these on top of each other because they'll yeah. Just somewhat clean this up, because if you leave the ink in here, the next project you go on to, you'll transfer that ink over. And then let's see what this one did. So this wasn't as sticky, wasn't as, this is a drier thingy bob. It's embossed that very nicely. Can you see that? Yeah. But again, it didn't do much else. I'll still use them because, you know, I can make something out of them. But that just shows you that the whole that whole experiment, you know, that Jennifer was doing with the stencils, that's just it. It works so well with the stencils as opposed to embossing folders. So I will bring all 3 of them in, all 6 of them in, just to quickly show you the difference that it's made. So hopefully I'll get this all in here, and they'll be in the same colour order. These are obviously still wet, so they will, when they dry off, they may change slightly. But these are the colour combos, you know, and the difference that it makes. So do you see how, so basically wherever the stencil is, the open parts of the stencil, that's what the baby wipe lifts off the paper. Whereas for these, it didn't really do that. So I guess depending how much ink you put on, maybe with these bottom ones, maybe you'll get a different look, I'm not sure. These ones, because they're raised, you could always, and it's a white core card, you could always sand over the top and then get a different look when you come to actually using these ones. Obviously when they dry, don't sand them when they're wet. So I hope that was quite, you know, for me that was quite a good experiment to see how to do these, you know, something a bit different. It's also a different video for me, so hopefully you found this interesting. And I will see you in the next one, and these will probably make an appearance at some point. I'll try and use them in some videos, especially these ones for, say, Halloween. You could even use that for Halloween, maybe on more of, you know, with a bit of witchiness or something like that. And then these are obviously spring, and then this is a wintry one. So yeah, we'll just see what I come up with to actually use them for. But I hope that was helpful. I hope that you get experimenting with things like this, and also this way you get to use your inks, whether it's your distress inks if that's what you love, or whether it's your Stampin' Up inks, or if you've got both like I do, then you know, it's good to play around with different papers and, you know, different mediums. So I hope this was helpful, and I hope that you like, subscribe and hit the notification bell if you want to see more from me. And until next time, I will keep you posted. I don't know what I'm going to say there. So until next time, I will see you on the flip side. I don't know how to end these things. Right, okay, I'm going to go. Right, okay. See you later, guys. Stay safe. Bye.